All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks, John. Pleasure to be here. So today I'm kind of wearing my hat as the local Boston chapter president for the VR/AR Association. And I want to also thank John for being a vice president with this organization as well. We're a global group that kind of puts together a lot of events and connects the dots between different cities around the world. We're in more than 60 today and continue to expand. So today I'm going to talk to you about a subject that I'm particularly passionate about, and that's creating really high quality content, specifically for the web and for XR. So here's today's overview. We're just going to go through quickly in 10 minutes, and then I'm going to show a nice demo at the end. These are all things that the content you'll see today is stuff that I've been creating at home in my last couple months, starting this new enterprise that I'm really excited about. So why 3D? I think today's consumer, when they think about 3D, they don't even know that they're consuming it. We're still, I think, toward the left on the photorealistic imagery. A lot of times when you're shopping on e-commerce sites now, you see these beautiful renditions that look like photos, and it helps you kind of contextualize the product, thinking about, oh, I'm inspired by this. I like how it looks. I'd love to see this in my space. And so as we start thinking about kind of the evolution of the technology, we can interact with the 3D, we can configure products, and that's still just in the early days, I think, on consumers' minds. We, of course, put together an augmented reality app at Wayfair, and a number of other retailers are kind of doing that as well. But the average consumer doesn't really know that this is a thing they can do yet. It's not a necessity, it's a nice-to-have feature. And so as I'm thinking towards the future, I think we're probably still in that 3 to 5 year range where it's going to go from a necessity, a nice-to-have, to a necessity. And as we start to expect that for our products, the ones that don't have the 3D content are going to start to fall behind. And so that's what I'm really excited about this space, is how do we create that content at scale? Because to date, Wayfair is probably one of the leaders in creating content, and we've done, let's say, 100,000 3D products, but that's 1% of the 10 million things we sell. And that inventory is constantly changing. That 100,000 products is about how many we add every month. So in order to keep up with this content creation, we really need to kind of democratize it, scale it out, and make it more accessible. And so there's two kind of core differences in today's 3D technology. I'm going to focus mostly on real time today, but rendered is what we're seeing in the high quality photorealistic imagery. It's the type of thing that we'll see in a Pixar movie or special effects. It's so good today that you can't tell the difference between something that has been rendered or something that's been photographed. And as we talk about real time, there's obviously constraints and limitations on our mobile device. We have to kind of make some sacrifices and shortcuts. However, we're seeing this technology that's basically driven by the game industry rapidly increasing in realism, to the point that I believe we're going to get to the same quality that we see in this rendered technology we have today, again, maybe 5, 10 years out, so that real-time experience is photorealistic and indistinguishable from reality. So those types of kind of future trends really get me excited. And when we think about creating 3D content, I think it's important to start creating that library at the highest quality possible. And with today's technology, we can downsample it for the web. So here's kind of a quick rundown of the anatomy of a 3D model. We're starting with a mesh, that's the geometry. This particular one I'll give a demo with later. It's the Air Force Academy Falcon, so it's our little mascot that they'd give to the speakers. This one I just got at a gift shop, but it's still kind of a fun little token of my kind of past history. In this particular breakdown, we take the texture, that's kind of the diffuse. For this model, I think that that's the most important map or material that you would have in a 3D model. So we have it at a higher resolution, so it's known as a 2K texture. That's still relatively small compared to the capture quality. These models that I'm producing today are around 8K, but in order to get them to a reasonable file size, this particular one, 1.4 megs, we want to make some compromises in reducing the triangle count on the mesh, and then the textures. Within the texture channels, you actually have a lot of different information that gets presented to the rendering engine that helps increase the realism, especially as you're moving around. So an interactive piece of 3D model on your camera, smartphone device allows you to see specular reflections and highlights, for example. So that realism starts to come into life as you move around the object. It goes beyond what you'd see from a static photo rendered image. So having those additional map channels, such as like a roughness that gets you that reflection, a normal map that brings in a lot of detail that you essentially lose when you reduce the quality of the mesh, metallic for metallic objects, and then occlusion for some of the areas like cracks and crevices that the lighting is going to darken naturally, but the game engine kind of has to cheat a little to get that effect looking accurate. So as we think about considerations for the web, I think that file size is probably today the most important. We're largely still accessing this data through 4G networks. As 5G networks become kind of a more common technology, then that file size is obviously going to get larger and the quality is going to get better. But today the recommendation is still around 3 megabytes, which isn't a ton of data when you consider you need to compress about 4 or 5 different textures, as well as a lot of geometry to really create this accurate looking content. The triangle range depends on the its complexity of the model, but typically you want to keep it under that 30,000 triangles in order for it to be performant on the web, or on a device like Magic Leap you want to bring in a lot of 3D content. So the more content you have, that entire budget that you have gets spent pretty quickly. So keeping the file size down while increasing the quality through textures is an important consideration. I mentioned earlier on the diffuse texture, I find that that's the most important one. That really has all the color and the detail. So you try to keep that a little bit higher, whereas the other texture channels are kind of adding more subtle effects that additively make the experience look more realistic. So typically just keep those at 1K to keep the file size small. Using JPEG as a compression standard image versus like a PNG or a TIFF or something that is a little heavier, potentially more accurate, but again, we're trying to compress things for the web. So JPEG's a standard that's been around for a while, and it works pretty well to keep these file sizes down. And of course, you want to remove textures that don't add value. You don't necessarily need to have every single channel that the 3D modeling software can produce. Sometimes less is more, and just be aware of that as you're creating the content. And so web standards is an area that we've been working towards as an industry. And unfortunately, there is a little bit of a divide. Up until about a year ago, it seemed like everyone was on this GLTF bandwagon, and we're all excited, like, wow, there's going to be a single format, the JPEG of 3D that everybody can use for the web. And then Apple kind of came out at their conference and said, hey, no, we're using USDZ. This is a great new format. And it actually is a great format, but unfortunately, it creates that somewhat of a rift in creating content. So as a content producer, you have to think about what are the different formats that are out there, how are users interacting with it, and is the look going to be consistent? I've got a couple screenshots out there. You can see some subtle differences between the screenshots that I grabbed. And some of that is the lighting characteristics of the viewer. So you might be viewing this on your desktop on the web. If you can bring in a 360 lighting environment, you can actually start capturing reflections off the device. And you'll see that in my demo that we're running on ARKit. It's actually mapping lighting information from the real world. So you can actually get reflections back from your environment. And as the technology gets better, I think we're going to see that more and more and begin to expect that the 3D model is really reflecting where it is. And blending that digital with real is going to be something that we're going to just take for granted, I think, soon. All right, so creating a USDZ file, this is kind of Apple's format. So you need a Mac. You have to have all your textures kind of all named and organized properly. You can use a common file like OBJ, which is kind of a standard 3D format. But then you need to run some command line tools. So today it's not necessarily consumer ready. It's fine for developers, but I think in order for this content creation to become more ubiquitous, our tooling is going to have to evolve. And of course, it's still within the first year of this format even being announced for ARKit. So, whatever, we're in the early days, which is, for me as a developer, kind of fun, opportunistic time. But in order for this to be more accessible, I believe we have to make this technology easier to access. And then GLTF, or the GLB compressed extension, is kind of the other common web format. I've personally been using Blender. It's a great open source 3D modeling tool, and they've got exporters for the 2 most current versions. The one difference that you'll notice for creating content in the GLTF format is that in order to save space, 3 of the files are compressed into a single file. So you have your ambient occlusion, your roughness, metallic. You have to put those in different channels. Anyway, once you do that, you can export it natively out of Blender. All right, lastly, with 2 minutes remaining, I just wanted to give a quick live demo. So I got a couple objects over here and my iPad that we'll try to throw on the stage. So got the bird. I'll put him up here first, and then we get another bird. I don't know, we get a bird theme going on today. All right, so this is just a web page running off Safari. When you've got an AR-capable device, they show this little icon up here that you can click into, which downloads the 3D model. So you're in a 3D model object viewer. You can kind of zoom in, see some of the detail, and then you jump into AR mode. Maybe, let's see, give it one more try. All right, there we go. All right, so we got our bird. We can kind of put them next to each other. You can see like the lighting on the stage is actually pretty washed out, so the iPad's not quite picking that up. But if we scale this guy up and I move around it, you can see that we're picking up a lot of little organic detail. And remember, this is only like a 1.5 meg file, so we're able to kind of get a lot of detail in a small, quick, easy to deliver on the web format. And let's see, we get another 20 seconds, so let's see if we can throw that eagle up there too. There we go. So again, I'll zoom them up so we can see some of the detail. But yeah, so when you're compressing for the web, you do lose some detail like here on the feathers. But generally for today's consumer, if you're looking at that, you're kind of seeing what you're going to get. So ultimately, we think AR as a tool is going to go from being this kind of fun novelty to changing consumers' mindsets to think like, how would I buy this? How would I have the confidence to buy this thing without actually seeing it in my space? Today, we take that for granted, and I think it's going to be an exciting new step for the technology. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great morning. Woo!